Good evening. Our coverage on Kivumbi2017. It's now just a little bit after 8 o'clock. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole, taking you through the next few hours of our... We will be speaking to all our reporters as well as our analysts. So, at this point, the polls have now been closed for 3 hours in an election that saw some parts of the country not participate in this historic election. The counting and tallying of vote results is underway. The National Tallying Centre has already received over 11,000 Form 34A. We have our teams following up on this process. Rita Tinina is at the Bomas of Kenya here in Nairobi. Timothy Otieno is in Homa Bay County. Murimi Mwangi is in Meru County. And Ben Kitili will be joining us from Migori County. Later, I will also be speaking to Martin Olo on the state of this vote and the state of this country. In fact, we shall start with that conversation right away before we go to the National Tallying Centre. That is at the Bomas of Kenya. Haman, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening to you, Yvonne.
What a day it has been. I just want to start by getting your feel of what this day has been like. There's been turnout issues. There's been some counties that did not participate. What's been your sense of the vote today?
I think we must first begin by commending ourselves as Kenyans. There are many people who thought when this day comes, we will burn ourselves. The fact that we are alive, we have not done major havoc to the country, is quite commendable. So it's been a good day. We must thank our God for that and our own maturity. Well, as you would know, there were mixed things here and there. There were areas that were prominently pro-Jubilee and therefore voting took place. There were other areas where voting didn't take place because either people chose not to participate or because of the heavy presence of the security forces, or even in some instances, some rioters, youth, would prevent perhaps people from going to vote. So that was a general picture. But you can also finish by saying the turnout was rather low, a little unexpected, especially from Jubilee strongholds. One would argue there was rain and that this is like a by-elections and traditional by-elections are not that well kind of.
Yeah, because that's the issue of turnout, isn't it? Yeah. That's usually a question of that in the case of a by-election.
Yes.
This was certainly not a by-election, but it was a repeat exercise. What do you think are some of the contributing factors to, you know, a low voter turnout in many parts?
I think, yeah, it surprised many people because of the kind of energy that the president and his team pumped into this election and the kind of resources you would imagine that were used. One would have expected a lot higher turnout than we saw today. I think one, like I've said, maybe the rains. Two, usually when you have no competitor, the president had no competitor.
Right.
So there are those who, after confirming that Raila was not participating, I think they felt there was no need. But it's also in other democracies, like Western democracies, like when a prime minister, like recently in Japan, you see, when a prime minister wants to call people's bluff, you are messing with him and he says, I want to show you I'm popular. He calls for an election. If something like this happened, he would resign. This kind of turnout would make him resign. Okay. Because this is not, you can't use this to show people.
All right. So it's a legitimacy question for you of this election and this process?
Pardon?
It's a legitimacy question, do you think?
Yeah, that's what we are going to face, whether we like it or not. Okay. Because if such a significant portion of the country doesn't participate, and there's open declaration by Raila yesterday that they are launching this national resistance movement, and they're kind of not quite going to recognize the presidents of Uhuru Kenyatta, then you are bringing on board issues of legitimacy.
But can we call it significant, though? I mean, there's 4 counties we know that, you know, the repeat will be done on Saturday. But is it significant enough?
You see, that is a narrative, I think, and I've heard people saying it too, and it could be true that it's a narrative they are trying to create, that this was a Allure affair, the boycott. But the truth, as a media person, you know, that's not true. You know, we've witnessed, we've seen in the media, we've talked to people on the ground, we've heard on radio. It's obvious that there are many parts of this country, elections either didn't take part at all, or there was such a significant presence of voters that you could actually conclude, in my view, more than roughly 50% of this country didn't participate in this election.
Okay, and just as we're speaking about that, and particularly with some of the areas that did not participate, I want to remind you of the chaos and insecurity in 4 counties in the former Nyanza province that led to the postponement of voting to the 28th of October, that is this Saturday. Let's listen to the IEBC chair, Wafula Chebukati, in his address at the Bomas of Kenya.
From the reports received, the election commenced as scheduled and has progressed well and peacefully in a majority of polling stations across the country. However, we have faced and continue to face challenges which are largely security-related in certain electoral areas. The Commission is consulting on and assessing the prevailing security situation that affects the electoral areas experiencing security challenges. And in this regard, the Commission has written and shared its specific concerns with the Inspector General of Police. The Commission is keenly following the security situation and continues its consultations on the same, and we have made a determination that in areas affected, which include the following counties, Homa Bay, Kisumu, Migori, and Shire, and in accordance with Section 55B of the Elections Act and Regulation 64A of the General Regulations, the Commission has postponed elections in those areas to Saturday, the 28th October this week. That is 28th October 2017. And so there will be repeat elections in those areas in accordance with the law as provided.
So let's take a look at what's been happening around the country after polls closing. Let's speak to Murimi Mwangi, who's in Meru County this evening. Murimi, good evening. Can you talk to us about the voter turnout and, more importantly, the vote counting and tallying process? Has that begun? How far has that gone?
Good evening, Yvonne. Well, vote counting began close to an hour ago in most of the polling stations across Meru County. That, of course, being due to the fact that as opposed to the tradition where by 5 p.m. you have people on the queue, in most polling stations that we visited around that time, most of those that participated in the election had already voted, and there were no queues which would warrant an extension past 5 p.m. and therefore counting started there soon after 5 p.m. We witnessed that in a few of the polling stations before we proceeded here to the Imenti North Constituency Tallying Center, where, as you can see, majority of the presiding officers from the polling stations in this constituency are handing over their results, what you perhaps can see in the background there. And then the returning officer for the constituency subsequently announces those results inside the hall next here. Remember, as a matter of procedure, there has been a strict verification of these results before they are put in the Form 34A at the polling station. And partly what we witnessed in most of those stations was that the clerks would be subdivided into the names of the presidential candidates that are on the ballot. There would be tabulation of that, and then the bundles would be counted and counted again, and thereafter those figures would be put into the hard copy Form 34A, subsequent to which a soft copy would be sent through the KIEMS kit to this tallying center here and the National Tallying Center to make verification easy. And therefore we expect that perhaps in the next 2 or 3 hours we should have the final result from this particular constituency, the presidential results from Imenti North constituency, as we await the final outcome from the National Tallying Center in Nairobi.
All right, Murimi, anything about the turnout? Because that's turning out to be a big conversation with this. Has the IEBC been able to talk about the turnout in Meru County?
Well, in most of the polling stations that I was able to visit by 5 p.m., the turnout was between 50%. The highest that I saw in one of the polling stations was 54.5. That, of course, showing that the turnout was not as good as was in the August 8th elections. And, of course, a majority of those that turned up to vote did so in the morning. In fact, most of the polling stations in the afternoon did not have much work to do because a majority of those that cast their ballots did so in the morning hours, and there has been, interpretation and counter-interpretation on why that turnout was low. But of course, a majority of the voters that did not participate in this particular election, some of them that I was able to spot in towns and various parts of this county, would say that they failed to do so because the main opponent of the man presumed to be the kingpin of the larger Mount Kenya region is not contesting in the election, and therefore perhaps that would inform the reason for the low turnout in a majority of the polling stations here. But to be specific, there is a polling station that we visited in Laare. You know, Laare is a part in Meru which traditionally has been like the heartbeat of the NASA or opposition leader Raila Odinga's support here in Meru County. And in that particular polling station, just next to that venue where Raila was to hold his final meeting, the voter turnout was 53.4 by the time we left that station, and a majority of those that we spoke to said they had cast their ballots in the morning hours and nothing much was happening in the afternoon. Yvonne.
All right, thanks for that, Murimi Mwangi. We'll check in with you again in a short while, but let's go to where it's all being put together, collated and tallied for the final result. Rita Tinina is at the National Tallying Center at the Bomas of Kenya, and she joins me now. Rita, so what's the latest? The last we heard from Bomas is that they have received more than 11,000 forms 34A. Has that number increased by now?
Yes, Yvonne, that number has increased. As of now, there are forms 34A from just over 16,000 polling centers. That is out of the 40,883 polling centers across the country. This time, Yvonne, won't be like during the August election. By then, the Commission was displaying results in text form. This time, that will not be happening. What will be on the IEBC portal is the scanned form. The polling officials at the polling centers, once they have collated their results there, they have filled in their forms 34A. They will scan the form before taking the physical form to the returning officer at the constituency level, and that scanned form is what now is available in the IEBC portal, Yvonne.
Oh, that's interesting. Do we have a big screen like we did before on the 8th of August?
We have two Yes, Yvonne, we have two screens. On the 8th of August, there were about 4 in this auditorium. Now there are 2. Earlier on, there was some images there, not the portal forms, the scanned forms themselves, but it was indicating a percentage of the counties. Right now, the screens are off. But Yvonne, remember the IEBC, since morning, we've just had one update from the Commission. And that update they gave around 3:30 p.m. That was about 9.5 hours since the polls opened. Then they promised they would give another update at 6 p.m. We are yet to see them. During that briefing at 3:30, that is when the Commission postponed the election in 4 counties. We were asking the Commission what will happen between now and Saturday, just less than 40 hours. And the IEBC chairman, Wafula Chebukati, said he has written to the Inspector General of Police to ensure that on Saturday there will be adequate security to ensure that at least the forms, the election materials rather, get to the polling centers. On the issue of the voter turnout, by then we asked, and they said they had not yet gone through the statistics from the polling centers to be able to know what the voter turnout is, and they promised that they would be giving us those figures at 6 p.m. So, Yvonne, we are still waiting.
We will all wait with you, Rita. Thanks very much for that. From the Bomas of Kenya, that's the National Tallying Center for this repeat presidential poll. Still waiting. It's about, what, 2 hours after that scheduled briefing from Wafula Chebukati, the chair. So let's carry on with our conversation. Martin Allure joins us. Good evening and thank you. Turnout. This is turning... It's such a pun intended. The turnout is turning out to be quite an issue. What are your thoughts as to the numbers? We'll see. We're yet to hear from the IEBC, but what do you think, and what will be the factors that will contribute to it?
I think that Yes, turnout is a problem, and maybe not so much of a problem because 2 elections within a month or within 60 days or inside 60 days, the level of enthusiasm is low. But also, this was one ballot being cast. So turnout is reflected by a number of other things. Yeah. I'm going there because I have an MCA that I want to elect, and therefore it's very important. Or I have an MP that I really want to elect, and then I have a governor that I want to elect, and all those things were now gone. Mm-hmm. Already we have, those leaders are in place, so people are only focusing on this one. And so the passion and perhaps the fire wasn't as much. And also in our history, by-elections, which this would look like, do not necessarily get such a high turnout.
Do you think it'll be a legitimacy question? Herman seems to think this will be significant enough for us to start asking some serious questions from tomorrow going forward.
I heard about it when I was standing over there. You see, sometimes we try to make Kenya look like another country, but it's just what it is. I mean, when you say in other countries somebody will resign, those are other countries. That's Japan, that is the US, that's the UK. Kenya is Kenya, and what are we really dealing with here? I don't think that you can talk about legitimacy at this stage. What you are dealing with is where are we constitutionally, where are we legally? And what could easily go out of hand? I mean, imagine you saying that it's a legitimacy issue, somebody resigns, then what happens? What is the form? What is the structure? What is the next thing, and so on? So we are in a fairly complex place. What we need now is to construct a forward-looking narrative. So where do we go from here? Yes, the country is divided. Because the country is divided, what do we need to do? Continue digging, continue pushing, or now find ways of saying, look, let us talk, let us build.
And how do we start to get ourselves out of that, Herman?
First of all, we must admit, though my friend Martin doesn't want us to admit, these are not issues of legality or otherwise. These are issues of acceptability, which are political, really, legitimacy. When you have a situation such as ours, where roughly half of the country, you see, you will have to remember, Yvonne, that in countries where there are groups that are saying that the government of the day is not legitimate, there are always pockets. But now we have a situation in our country where like half of the country has serious issues about the legitimacy of the president. That's not something you can wish away. Now, my thinking is now that we have reached this day and the elections have taken place, it is in the interest of this country that we must go the whole stretch. If I were the one to decide, there should be no petition against this election. Let the president
but that is a constitutional
No,
right.
I'm saying if I were the one, you see. Right. In other words, there are people in this country who will decide whether it happens or not. They have that power.
What would be your basis to say that?
Let me make my case and you will see what I'm talking about. So that we swear in the president. With that kind of confidence, now that you are the president and the commander-in-chief, okay, you can then now look at this country, dialogue with the country, and look for a way forward with the confidence that you are the president. When you are fighting to remain or assume office for the second term, you may not be stable enough. So I pray that he should be given the chance to become president and then lead a national healing process that will bring Kenyans together. It may end up in an election earlier than even 2022. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. Yeah. So, Martin?
My idea is that we seem to be fixated on elections. Yet our problems don't get solved by elections. Neither will we say now after today we are united. So the issues that divide us remain core. And it's not about whether we can then go to another election, because then the results will be the same. And this question of legitimacy that he's pushing would also be the same. If it was the other side, the questions of legitimacy would arise.
I don't think so.
Why not? Because
explain.
basically what you're saying is that we are divided. So whichever side of the divide you are, you will still raise the issue of legitimacy. Because, let me make the point.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not persuaded that what we should be struggling here is to just look at the issue of the presidency and issues of elections as if that's the be and all in terms of what our challenges are. We have agreed we have a tribalism is our problem. We've agreed that even when you're saying that if you had your way, you would not have a petition, the constitution that we have for ourselves says that there is room for anybody to petition.
So how do we
you
start
can't
to
run away
solve
from
the
that.
issues? Do we start to talk about it? Because talk is such a, you know, in political connotation, talk just starts
You
to
see
be
what I'm trying to
nusum kate,
explain?
that sort of thing.
Yvonne.
So reconciliation and
Yvonne,
talking, yes.
If you are a Kenyan of average mind, you would know that our problem has to do with elections.
How so?
You'll know that from as early as the 1960s, the people in power have always made it difficult for anybody else to get power constitutionally through an election. We've been working on this from the days of Kivumbi2017. We've done tremendously well so far. But there are issues of how we can conduct our elections in a manner that whoever emerges victor will be recognized by the loser.
All right. I want us to take a break, but I want to ask, is our problem elections or is it access to power and access to resources?
It is elections.
No.
It's elections.
Or is that triggered by an election?
What an election does, Yvonne, an election does is like a queue. When you're on a queue and you know there's a chance that you'll get there and have your pie, you can wait. But once you make it impossible for anybody else to get to the presidency, then there is a problem in the country.
All right, speaking of the presidency, I just want to inform you of the results that you are seeing on your screens. These are a collation of Forms 34A that have been uploaded by the Electoral Boundaries Commission, the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, in their portal. So these are the numbers that we are putting together from the IEBC portal. Remember, Rita Tinina informed us just a short while ago that there's now over 16,000 Forms 34A that have been received at the National Tallying Center. We'll continue to give you more of these results as we put them together from the IEBC portal. These are the results. The power, the access to power, the getting to the presidency that we've been speaking about. As you can see, President Uhuru Kenyatta is the candidate for Jubilee in the lead right now. And there's Abdu Badida from the Alliance for Real Change and the independent candidates as well, with 6 and 4. That's for Nyaga and Mwaura, and 1 for Shakalaga Khwajirongo. We'll be talking about an interesting thing that's coming up. Of course, Uhuru Kenyatta has 99% of the votes counted so far. 99% of the votes counted so far. So it's important for us to understand that figure and exactly what it means. So we will come back with my panel tonight. That's Martin Olo and Herman Manyora. I want to talk about the implication of Raila still receiving votes despite the fact that he did not participate in this election. We're taking a short break right now on Kivumbi 2017. We'll be right back.